What's going on, Falcons fans? Hey, man, it's Toby D, Pound for Pound ATL. And, of course, I got my main man, JR, over there. And tonight we got a special guest that we're glad to have on, Cody Alexander, owner of MatchQuarters.com. And, man, you guys, when you get a chance, you have to go and check out the massive football knowledge that he has over there. You can definitely learn a lot about the game. What's going on, Cody?
Hey, glad to be here. Just trying to
Yeah,
get out of the heat.
it's finally cooled off a little bit this past couple of days here out here in Georgia. We are in the low 90s instead of the mid 90s, so yeah, a little bit of a break, but humidity is up, so that gives you the donkey kick in the chest as you walk outside. But
Yes.
man, we appreciate you joining us again tonight. We had kind of a lost episode, so due to some technical issues, but we're going to try to see if we can't recapture that magic here again tonight. Toby, you want to set the stage for us?
Yeah, so I mean, with that being said, man, I just like you to go through, Cody, what you got going on and kind of some things that done coming up to this moment to how you got into football.
Yeah. Big thing with me is my father has always been a football coach, kind of been a football junkie like I have. And so I knew early on all I wanted to do was football. I've kind of been kind of a nerd about it since I was a kid. All my English teachers in college always try to get me to get an English major, and I thought that was weird, which I don't know why, because like Art Briles has an English major, and I work for him at Baylor. So, there are some good football coaches that are English teachers. It just wasn't something I wanted to do. So I went into history, and then I became a history teacher and coach. And first year of coaching football, I knew I wanted to do something a little bit bigger than that. I wanted to try my hand at the college level. So I was lucky enough, got in at the right time. Worked under Phil Bennett, who's now at North Texas. He's been at LSU, A&M, Arizona State, K-State. He's a head coach.
Right.
I mean, he's been everywhere, and he's pretty well known throughout the NFL and college football landscape. And that's really kind of where I got to just nerd out on defense. And at the exact same time, that's kind of when the Art Briles system was just exploding. It kind of gone from Chip Kelly at Oregon. The baton had been passed to Art Briles. So I was there during RG3's Heisman year all the way through to when we won our first Big 12 championship. So I go back to I had a son while I was a GA, and I had to make money. And I don't know if you know anything about the business, but it's kind of a poor kid's business. And then you get your shot, and then by that time you're kind of like higher 20s, 30s, and then you're making money, and if you talk to anybody at that level, they'll tell you stay single as long as you possibly can, so that way there's no distractions. But that just wasn't the plan for me. That's not what God had in store for me. I had, like I said, I had my son. Literally, I have a really cool picture of me walking the tarmac to go to the Fiesta Bowl, and he's on my shoulder looking back.
Slick. That is awesome.
Yeah, my 9-year-old is like not like his reality and like what he is able to do. I mean, my dad and I are constantly like, bro, like you can't just walk into any locker room in America, and like he thinks we can go anywhere, because I know so many people, and he just thinks that like, oh, Dad, can we go to the stadium? Can we go get in the locker room? Can we go do that? I'm like, I don't.
That is an interesting demeanor. See, it's funny that you say that because to try to learn the game better myself, to take it from a sitting in my house like studying the stuff and trying to get a deeper and better understanding, I've started to like volunteer at a local like 8th grade level. And you're right, like I thought to myself like, oh man, I could probably like maybe one day, and I'm like, no, wait a minute, I'm almost 40. Like that time has passed. Like I have the time of trying to work your way up is like that window has shut. But it's still interesting to be around a bunch of guys who have been coaching their whole lives, because it does give you a different perspective, and it does give you a different understanding and being able to see it through a different lens, which is why when Toby said that you agreed to sit down with us, man, I was over the moon, because to be able to sit down and talk to somebody who has your experience is is pretty big, for us, because I don't know whether we realize it or not, but when we hired Dean Pease and we were looking at that whole, like, what he was doing in Tennessee, and we were trying to understand and learn more, like really try to understand more about, like, the 4.25 and the, creepers and simulated pressures, that's when I really like found some, like, a good bit of your stuff, online. And so to now be able to, like, ask you questions is pretty cool. But speaking of that, like, what is, like, I don't know how to, like, I want to transition into, like, the nickel has become such a big part of, of the pro game and of the college game. Like, when did y'all, like, really start seeing that stuff, like, switch over from, like, normal bases to nickels almost becoming bases?
It really started with kind of the dying out of Neanderthal ball right there at the turn of the decade, like around 2010 in the NFL. If you really think about it, so, like, and I wrote about this in Hybrid, so I kind of did, like, a history project, and I went back and all the way from, like, Dave Arnsparger and the 74 Dolphins all the way through to kind of like what you're seeing with the Iowa State odd stack, kind of that's kind of taken over. Really, I mean, I would say almost 50% of high school defenses are running some three high, and then you go to the college game and you have the tight front, or are you all that, really it began in that transition because there's a typical ebb and flow in football where the defense, it reacts to the offense. The offense then says, oh, you guys figured it out, let's go do something different. Well, the spread and really kind of that the early stages. So the Coryell and the West Coast offense were all kind of, I mean, in the 90s, that is 90s football, right? Like that's late 80s, 90s football. Well, and really it begins in the 80s with Lawrence Taylor, LT. Okay, when LT came along, this is the invention of the what's called the H-back, right? So Joe Gibbs is like, I can't leave these tackles. People forget your athletic lineman used to be your guard. Then it shifted to tackle because of and the 3-4 is born, right? Arnsparger had been running the 3-4 in the 70s with the Dolphins, but it wasn't until the 80s when it got supercharged with Lawrence Taylor that it was like, oh, now we've got something. So what you get is that, okay, you put an athlete on the field, we can't handle it. What do? We get big. So all these offenses get big. They go 12 personnel, right? So they go, or 21 personnel. They have a tight end who can go deep, right? Because, I mean, we still have Hall of Fame tight ends in every decade. You're still, big pass receivers down the middle. But you need that fullback or that H-back type that's the blocking tight end, right? So you get large. Okay, so what does defense do? Defense goes, okay, well, you're getting bigger, so we're going to get bigger. So all through that decade, I mean, go back and look at like 2008, 2009, 2010, like Alabama defenses. And go look at the old Ravens. I say old.
Yeah, like Mount Cody and all them.
Right. Go look at those, like Saragusa playing in the middle, right? I mean, guys like that, they had Mike linebackers over 260, 270 pounds. I think you couldn't.
Well, it's
can't play.
To bring it back to the Ravens and Dean Pease or whatever, you had Courtney Upshaw at 280 listed as an outside linebacker. So yeah, I mean, you were trying to answer it by getting bigger on the line.
And so what happens then is there's this fight going on after 2000 offensively, and this is the true trickle up effect. high school offenses and offensive coordinators are looking around. They're saying, look, we got all these tweener kids. We can't just play Neanderthal ball. Like it's not working for us. 7-on-7 starts becoming really popular. You get more and more. So the passing game becomes more and more efficient at the high school levels. How do you equalize talent? Well, if I've got these big guys, I'm going to take all these tweeners. I'm going to start spreading them out.
Making them run sideline to
sideline. I'm going to go right, and now they can't cover. And we may be lesser athletes, but we're smaller and quicker, so we can spread you out, and we're just going to nickel and dime you to death. And then what ends up happening is as that goes, so you get the Tampa 2, you go back to Neanderthal ball, so everybody gets really big, right? And so then offenses are like, well, it's the natural evolution. We're gonna go spread again. The difference that happened now, and why are we seeing now everybody's just kind of doing it and we're not necessarily going back, is just the fact that I think hybrid athletes at every position outside of the O-line is now a norm. I mean, you go look at like a guy like Deebo Samuels, who's begging to be a receiver so he can get paid, and then he can also prolong his career. Running backs are not only anymore, if you want to be a running back, an every down back, you have to be able to block, you have to be able to run, you have to be able to catch the ball. And I think what you're seeing now is that offenses have kind of embraced that hybrid role. They're getting lighter. Right now, we're starting to see, and if you're going to start seeing this again at every level, is because everybody's going light in these nickel packages, right? And so what happens at the college level, it explodes and everybody runs kind of the 3-3-3, right? The Iowa State system with it, and everybody's a hybrid, right? You only have like one Mike linebacker, maybe two if you're two big linebackers out there. Everybody else is a safety or corner. What you're starting to see is 12 personnel coming back. 12 is the new 21, right? So that was the Tampa 2's answer was, well, everybody's just going to get 21, 3 yards in cloud of dust. You got all these tiny little linebackers running around because they have to be able to run the pole, right? So what are we going to do? We're just going to get big, and we're going to be physical with you, and we're going to wear you down, right? So that's all the 17-14 games, the 9-7 games that we saw all throughout that. Well, then the spread won. And the spread won because you look at every team sport, right? And every space sport. Look at hockey. Look at basketball. Look at soccer. What is everybody doing? They're spreading everybody out. They're getting faster. If you're big, you better be a freak, right? It's funny. My father-in-law has season tickets to the Stars games, and I go, and so I'll hear these old guys that talking about how, man, that kid right there, he couldn't have played 10 years ago, but look at now, he's like one of the best players, and you can go down the list of guys that 10 years, 15 years ago in hockey couldn't play. Go look at basketball now, and if you're going to be a big man, you better be able to shoot the three, right? Because everything's spread out, and it all has to do too with like the embracing of analytics. I think soccer was probably the first to kind of real get into analytics. Then you have basketball. It's kind of I call it the Eurification of sport, because think about it. You go over to Europe, their coaches are better at practice running. I went to England this off season, and they're kind of talking, we're really good at football because that's what we do, right? So the scheme part is easy for us. But like the way that they do practices and the way that they look at things, and they're small side games, nobody's ever just standing around. You look at football, like I just got back from my son's youth league. I mean, we still have kids standing in line. We still have one kid
doing that. Like I had 5 lines tonight. Everybody was lined up. You got boom, 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 and yeah.
Right. And so you go to Europe, and that doesn't exist. Like you go to basketball, which is a movement sport, it doesn't exist. Now we are a little different, and I preface that with football is different. You cannot. One of my good friends, Richie Gray, he's the only human being that's ever coached in all the contact leagues. So that's rugby union, rugby league, and the NFL. And he's got these tackling bags that Rydell owns, and they're about to take over, right? And he even says, and this is a guy that has coached at both, he's you can't compare it. It's not the same because our rules are differently. It's more of a structured game, so we have structure. But going back to why the spread, and it kind of encompasses the culture of football. Why has the spread won, and why are we not seeing a movement back to kind of Neanderthal ball? And that's because of analytics. Passing is much more efficient than running the ball. Now, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, everybody kind of, the running back is dead. Why are you paying Zeke? All that stuff. It got overblown because football is a rigid sport just in general. I think we're seeing that on the defensive side, this transition to young. I mean, look at all the best DCs in the NFL right now. Or there are a lot of up and coming. There are a lot of young guys, up and coming, new ideas, different ways of doing things. Obviously, you have old guys that are doing a great job, but what you're seeing is defensively is taking more of an offensive mindset of being more creative with player placement. Usage of how am I going to use this guy? I always say Roy Williams was the great Oklahoma safety, played for the Cowboys. Like, he was a decade ahead of where he was supposed to be. Right. Because the moment the box backer died was the moment he entered the league. And he still had a relatively good career, but you just didn't have that box safety anymore, right? You couldn't play with it. And now what we're looking at is, like, if you look at the Fangio system, they have a left and right safety. They don't even have a free safety strong safety. They just have safety.
What we have talked about multiple times with Pease. Like, his safeties are interchangeable. Like, there is no strong, there is no weak. Like, you have no, like, dedicated single high. You got to be able to, like, swap up and be able to play both roles.
Yes, and I think what we've seen now is, like, instead of the square peg round hole, right, and I'm just going to hammer it in there and hopefully the guy fits, is now that we're just saying, look, I'm throwing the board away and I'm just going to play with what I got, right? Like, if I've got an athlete, I've got an athlete. What we're seeing now is a collecting of safeties. Never before in the NFL has a safety been more
and they're about to start getting paid like it too.
And it's because right. And corner will always be corner. Edge rush will always be edge rusher. A 3-tech's a 3-tech, a nose is a nose. Like, if you can dominate in that, the Hall of Fame guys now, the guys that are just going to get paid are the guys like Aaron Donald that can play nose all the way to 5, right? I bet if we stood him up, he would be okay.
He'd probably succeed.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. Or the elite edge rushers, right? You're always going to have those guys. But even now, those guys have to be every down players. You can't just have a kid that's just a package guy and you're going to sit there and pay him $10, $15, $20 million. Right. Now, you used to have, we're drafting him and he's only going to be a third down edge rush guy. You don't see NFL teams now saying we're not wasting draft capital on that. Like, you have to be more. You have to add value to the organization other than that. And I think that's the running back and the linebacker, which are kind of these middle players in the system, right? That I think are the guys that are kind of getting they're readjusting what they're doing, right? What their role is. I think now most people are going to admit in the NFL you got to have some sort of a tandem running back system. You can't just let the guy carry the load. There's too much data now that states once you carry a certain amount that your body basically is out. So if you want this guy to stay fresh all year, you do have to kind of have a pitch count on the guy. Yeah. And then linebackers, you have to be able to play in the box and play in coverage. And I remember this when I was working at Baylor and we were going through the Big 12, right? It was quarterbacks, spread offenses. We had the best offenses in the country. And I remember going, and because my job was to go find us, I needed to go find us a linebacker. And the question I always got back was, you need to ask them, can he cover the number 3 receiver if we need him to? Like in 3-by-1, can he cover that guy? Can he take that guy up the middle? Can he run the vertical column? Can he run the vertical hook? And I think, to me, that's where you're at now is like linebackers that are 260 and they only can play in the box. Like, you better be able to rush the passer, because if you can't, you're not going to play for very long in the NFL.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Cody, because what we seem to be talking about is what Arthur Smith preached about last year, and that's the positionless player, right?
Right.
I was reading an article that you had, and you called it positionless defense 2019. And you talked about simulated pressures and creepers in there being associated with that. What exactly, when we talk about creepers, because we know we've seen DUPs adopt that, and when he was with the Tennessee Titans, right? He brought it over a little bit to the Falcons. Now, he didn't run it as much as he did in 2019 with the Titans that year, which was really their best year under him. But he did introduce it a little bit in a couple of games last year. What exactly is that when it comes to creepers and simulated pressures and the positionless defense that you were talking about?
Okay, so umbrella look at it is you can blitz in the NFL, you can blitz all 11 players because the hash is in the middle. Now, you're probably not going to blitz your premier corner, or what we would call in the college and the high school level, your boundary corner. That's your number one guy. That's your dog. He's going to go line up against the number one guy. But so what you have is 10 of 11 defenders should be able to rush the ball, meaning that if I send somebody, my D-line, probably other than my nose and my tackle, they need to be able to drop. And if I'm an odd front team, I've got 3 down linemen that probably I'm not going to ask them to drop into coverage other than to just be like screen protection or spy the quarterback on a drop 8. So the creeper, and I'll go through. So a creeper definition is a replacement pressure. And the reason why it's called creeper is because you've got an overhang or someone outside of the box is creeping down towards the line of scrimmage, right? And the reason why it's called a replacement pressure is because I'm taking an off-ball defender, someone on the second or the third level, so linebacker or defensive back depth, and I'm blitzing them off the edge. I'm attacking the C gap or I'm attacking the B gap. So I'm attacking the edges of the box. And then what I'm going to do on the other side is I'm going to drop an edge player. So my D end or edge, everybody calls them edge now. So I'm going to drop my edge from the other side into coverage. And what that allows me to do is I'm really only rushing 4, but I'm giving the illusion that I'm bringing pressure, right? Okay, so that's a creeper. That's a replacement pressure. You have 2 types of sims, and this is the way that I do it. You will hear some coaches, anytime it's a box backer and they're blitzing, no matter what, they're going to call that a simulated. You can do creepers in 10 personnel or sometimes in some spread sets with your will linebacker attacking the C gap. That's kind of how I determine it. But a simulated pressure, you have 2 types. You have a presentation and then you have an off-ball simulation, right? So a presentation is kind of what most people understand simulated pressures, right? Is that I'm putting 5+ defenders on the line of scrimmage, and then I'm going to bring somebody from the second or third level, and then I'm going to drop guys, and we're really only going to rush 4.
But in that presentation, the QB doesn't know which 4 are coming, right?
Right. And so the thing with those is it's all about pass protection manipulation. So these are going to be your 3rd and long, 2nd and long. I know it's a passing down. They've got they're going to have to take vertical routes, meaning it's going to be long developing. So we want to be able to we want to get the pass protection. We want the quarterback's eyes on the pressure. We want the running back to stay in, and we want him to throw to a check down underneath the zone, right? The umbrella coverage. That is a presentation. Now, you can run certain ones are really good on 3rd and medium when you know you're going to get everybody's around the sticks. You can run some man coverage ones, especially like the internal pressure ones are really good off of those presentation sims. But the other type, which is becoming more and more popular, and you definitely see these a lot more in the NFL, are these off-ball simulated pressures where we're going to give you a presentation of a static alignment, right? So, like, let's say we're a nickel team, so we're 4 down. We've got everybody. We've got our 2 high shell. Everything looks great. But then post-snap, I'm going to blitz a box backer. But I'm going to drop a defensive end. So it's still a replacement pressure, but I'm simulating that 5-man pressure, and I'm going to drop a guy off. But it's coming from the inside of the box. So everybody's eyes are in the box, and everybody sees this pressure. And so if you bring both interior guys, you got to drop both ends. If you bring one guy, you drop the other. And so that's kind of where it is. Creepers are really good if they're attacking the edges of the box. Obviously, you're kind of, that's where you're attacking with the creeper. Usually B-gap simulated pressures or B-gap creepers are really good versus gap scheme because you're either chasing the polar or punching the polar. Internal off-ball sims, those are really good versus zone because you're forcing that center to make a decision, right? If you float him and he just kind of squats right there, we're going to cross face and everything gets funneled into the A gap. If he chases the nose or he chases one of our interior linemen, then it's home.
Right,
like
yeah,
I'm
you got a
going
wide
straight
open
down
alley to go after him.
And that's happened to me last year. Was my linebacker almost didn't make the tackle because I think he was so surprised that nobody touched him. Like, I mean, that thing opened up like the Red Sea, and he was like, "Oh my!"
I'm about to say, eyes got that big in his head.
Yes, he almost made the tackle. I mean, thankfully he made the tackle, but it was like, I mean, and some of these too, like if you hit the B gap really good, especially at the lower levels, you can almost beat. Like we had a really fast outside linebacker. He beat a dart. So the tackle's pulling. He beat the tackle on the pole. The tackle basically blocked him. So, I mean, you can get some of these pressures are really good versus these run schemes. But the reason why they're being used now and you're seeing more and more is because early down passing is now that's what everybody wants to do, right? I'm going to do early down passing. Right, I'm going to use quick motions that change the strength. Right, I'm going to either use go watch the Rams, go watch the 49ers, you go watch some of it's kind of those McVay Shanahan offenses. What are they doing? Quick motion across. Right, the way to combat that is to run a too high shell. Now, you don't necessarily have to run quarters or cover two, but that too high shell is even, right? So if I send somebody across, a simulated pressure, it doesn't necessarily have to change. I'm only rushing 4, right? And my distribution's really not changing. So I don't necessarily have to make wholesale adjustments. I mean, think about it. If I've got a hot pressure and I'm sending 6, or I'm running man coverage and I'm sending 5, I've got to communicate and we're running with everybody. Right? But if I'm running a creeper or a simulated pressure, then and they're running pop motion, I don't have to necessarily adjust. I just have to make sure everybody kind of has an idea of where that umbrella is going to be. And so that's why they're becoming more and more. It's like, to me, I think what you're doing now is you're taking Arnsparger's safe pressure, right? Dick LeBeau took it and added the third level to it. I mean, if you've watched the Steelers forever, it's always that blitzing safety, right? He always had it like an Hall of Fame safety, and he was always blitzing off the edge, or he had a Hall of Fame corner. He was blitzing them. They had sacks, they had picks, they had everything, right? And so what you're doing now is passing has become so good that when you rush 5, you better be able to win your one-on-ones. And that's what the Rams are doing. The Rams and Staley, with what he did in the offseason with the Chargers, they want to run that 5-1 front. And they're saying, our 5 guys, we've got, for the Chargers, it's going to be their edge players, right? One of our edges, we've got 2 elite guys. One of them's going to win a one-on-one, right? One of them. Bosa somebody's winning. One of them's going to win a one-on-one. And then with the Rams, they're like, look, you can double team Aaron Donald. He's probably still going to win it or at least disrupt it. But if you double team him, who are you not blocking? Now that guy's going to go make a play. And so that philosophy is a little bit on the extreme side, but the coverage aspect of it, the too high shell, running multiple coverages, being able to rotate those safeties post snap, especially with play action being such a high usage on first down now, that I always tell it this way, if I'm the quarterback and I'm under center and I have to turn, I'm turning my back. So my mental model, I'm creating a mental model pre-snap of what the picture is going to look like. Right. And so if it's a static too high shell, I have to sit there and think, okay, is one safety a little further down than the other? What's the contour? Now I'm talking about contour. So I went from what's the shell to, okay, what's the contour? Who's high? Who's low? What do my stats tell me? What's my film analysis tell me? Okay, this is what I think it is. Ready, break, snap. I turn my back to go look like I'm going to hand the ball. I come up, and now I have to deal with a completely changed picture And
Right,
I've got to decide, maybe we ran a cover 3 beater, but now they're sitting in quarters. Okay, well, maybe we have a quarters beater off this play action, and now they're in middle of the field close. So to me, that's and I had a buddy of mine who is connected in the NFL. He was talking to a QC friend of his. It's on the offensive side, and he's like, I don't know why everybody doesn't do it like that, because it's so hard for the quarterback mentally. And here we talk about it all the time. All the pundits talk about it. They talk about it. Right now everybody's talking about quarterback tiers, right? There's not that many elite quarterbacks in the NFL. So if I know that on average I'm only paying 2 or 3 elite quarterbacks, well, I want to make it as hard as possible for all these mediocre guys. And that's one way to kind of do that. So in an offensive game where everything is geared towards the offense, from penalties to the way the game is called, the way the game is officiated, how can we gain that back defensively? And I think that's what we're seeing with the evolution of and more usage of nickel players and hybrid players, 2 high safeties, creepers, and sims, all kind of encompassing this way of defensive philosophy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly like, when you listen to you talk now, like, and in a way, like mentally going over our roster, like we have guys like, Mikael Walker, who at Fresno State, like, rushed the passer, dropped into coverage. Like, he played backer, he played safety, he played DN. And, when he was coming out of the draft, he reminded me a lot of what everybody was hyped about with Isaiah Simmons coming out of, Clemson. And it's that same deal. It's that guy who can play. It's that Swiss Army knife, that, money backer, jack backer, whatever you want to call him, to where you can't key in on what they're doing just by who's on the field. And like for Pease in Tennessee, it was Logan Ryan was the guy who, like, seemed to really make the engine go in a sense. And like we had that here with Isaiah Oliver until he went down in the Washington game. And then, like Pease himself said, it became too predictable. Like you could key in on what they were attempting to do by just who they had on the field. So that positionless player is becoming a very important cog to the machine.
Yeah, I thought that was something made up, and now it turns out it's actually a real thing with the positionless player. I thought Arthur Smith was making something up when they were saying that, but you're stating that that's not something made up. That is actually something that is real, and it's becoming more prevalent, especially now going from college into the NFL level.
Yeah, and so think about it this way. If I can, like, and offenses do this, right? I mean, and I think I use the 49ers because I think, they have that freakish fullback. They got Deebo Samuel, who can line up in the back. They can line him up at receiver. If I can get in 21 personnel, it's pretty predictable what you're going to put out on the field. You're going to put, in most defenses in the NFL, you're going to go ahead and you're going to put your bare front out there. You're going to go basically a 5-2 is what it's going to look like. You're going to run some sort of cover 3 because there's only 3 vertical threats. But then if I can do that, if I can get you in that, and then I'm going to go line up an empty, and now you're asking that edge defender that's got to go out there, and now he's got to defend my fullback that's that's just as good as any tight end. And that can run vertical routes on you. Now it changes the game. So how can a defense do that? Well, I call it all 11 football, right? It's what we all grew up in a lot of times, especially if you played football at all in the 90s. You kind of had, it was just kind of, you had 11 guys. And if you wanted to get in a spread set, you just moved your fullback or your running back out to the slot receiver, right? So you weren't really packaging anything. Then the NFL became so package heavy that you almost, by trying to be unpredictable, you become predictable, right? Because it's kind of the opposite. When you try and do something to the extreme, you actually you reduce everything down, right? So if I know if this, and this guy is on the field, this is the plays that we're going to get. Well, it makes it really easy for the defensive coordinator to play call, because you're not going to use those packages enough on certain downs. So you actually have limited the data, so they know what you're doing. So now what we're seeing is like what you said with positionless on offense. Defensively, if I can give you a static look, whether it's an odd front, even front, maybe I change the front up just to keep your linemen sinking, but we have the same people out there all the time. You have no idea what we're going to do. And that to me is the key, is like, okay, we're taking, and I think that's what's different now about defense and the mentality defenders have, is they're having, like I said at the beginning, they're having more of an offensive mindset about this. Yep. How can we attack the offense with what they're doing? You know, I think with read stunts on the front, we're seeing more of that because teams don't want to rush passers, right? Teams have figured out that either you're really good, like the guys like Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, when they know you're blitzing, they're going to complete the pass, right? But then you also have guys like, they were talking on the local radio here today about like Dak Prescott. After the Broncos just sat back and let him throw interceptions and throw incompletes and throw into coverage, people were like, "Oh, well, we'll just sit back and play coverage." And then the Cowboys' offense just kind of died from there. And it's not that people weren't pressuring them; it was that we know you're going to hold the ball. You're being told not to go run necessarily. You can't kill us with your legs. So we're just going to let you sit there and you're going to make a mistake. I go back and you look at the Alabama versus the Mississippi State game, when all Alabama did was literally just run drop 8. They ran drop 8 and they just said, Mike Leach, your quarterback is not good enough to pat the ball and just throw. And then we're just going to sit back, and they had one of their worst games. And then everybody started running drop 8 coverage against Mississippi State, and their offense kind of died, right? Because it takes an elite quarterback to be able to sit there and just really pinpoint accurate with a bunch of athletes on the field. And I think that's kind of, we're saying, okay, you want to do this on offense, we're going to do the same thing on defense, and we're going to make it really difficult for you to throw the ball.
JR, I don't know about you, but it's starting to make a lot more sense with these players that we drafted this year and educated.
Troy Anderson I mean, it's guys who can do multiple things. You know, it's guys who can stay in and set the edge, or or come downhill with force, because we all know that Dean Pease likes his linebackers who want to fit that gap. So you bring Rashad Evans in, you got Mykal Walker, you draft a Troy Anderson, who's a 240 plus, like, freakish athlete who can, both run and, run and hit. And, we'll see if his coverage matches up, because sometimes that Montana State, that coverage didn't look like top notch, but we'll see if they can coach him up. But yeah, like, listening to Cody talk, like, the picture is definitely becoming clearer of what we're attempting to do. And oddly enough, the picture is becoming clearer of what Arthur Smith is attempting to do as well. to be able to counteract, some of this, like, fast flowing defenses as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to present a problem, the way I always have heard, if you're going to present a problem, you better have the answer how to also that problem too, because somebody else eventually is going to do it to you. So you need to know how to answer it.
Now, when you talk about, like, is there like a preferred coverage on, like, running a nickel, or is it just more based on your personnel? The reason why I bring that question up is because in the offseason we had signed Casey Hayward, who is more of, like, by the numbers, more of a zone coverage cornerback, and we've been told by many people that Dean Pease is more of a man guy, but it seems odd if you're more of a man guy to be then signing a zone heavy guy. Is there, like, a preferred coverage behind that nickel defense?
I think if you really want to break it down to the minutia, it really comes down to down and distance, and then what is that pressure and what's on the field. I think what you see a lot of in the NFL is middle of the field closed. That allows you to kind of man up the outside. That's what corners are paid for. And, I always told that to my corners, and my safeties too, is that, look, that corner over there signed up to defend that fade route. Like that's what he signed up for. He when he came out to football and he decided he was going to play corner, he came over and got in line, and then that's what he signed up for. In the NFL, same thing. College, same thing. That guy's getting paid. That guy signed up for that job. And so to me, I think with the dominance of the middle field close is really a lot has to do too with kind of what routes are coming and different things like that. It's interesting. I just got done watching the 49ers versus the Bengals, and they're running a ton of Tampa 2. Robert Saleh, and I know that's not who's there, but Ryan worked on Saleh. But it's such a stark difference from that Seahawks system. Then you go and you look at here in Dallas, former Atlanta head coach. It's not cover 3. Everybody's like, "Oh, this defense is different," and it is, but it isn't. He's running a lot more man, and that's because he has man corners. So I do think it's kind of a little bit of it is who do you have? If we have a lot of man guys, we're gonna run a lot of man. Okay, not everybody's going to be Gus Bradley and just going to run cover 3 till nauseum just with whoever I got. Like I'm running cover 3. We're running it. I know we're running it. Hopefully my guys can figure it out. You just don't see things like that. The Fangio system, and I think with what we're seeing now, everybody kind of is like, well, man or zone, right? Are we playing middle field close, middle field open? I really think it boils down to one, who you're playing, what their scheme is. To me, if I'm playing a guy or if I'm playing Miami, for instance, and they've got all the fastest receivers in the NFL are on the same team, right? And they got a quarterback who can't necessarily throw the ball super deep. They're going to run a ton of crossing routes, right? They're just going to try and eat you. Well, I probably don't want to sit in a ton of single high coverage because, and especially guys that are low. Like to me, I think what you see is, especially in the Fangio system, like weak rotation. And I say weak rotation, meaning that we're spinning away from the passing strength. Quarters is inherently weak rotation anyway, in the way that it fits. Right, that backside safety, how you're going to play it, things like that. It's inherently weak rotation, so it fits well with a kind of how that weak rotation that the Fangio system runs. Think about what kills in the NFL. It's all those crossing routes over the middle, right? Well, if I hammer a safety down into the box and now I've got everybody down and they're running behind me, I'm working backwards, and it's always easier to work down than it is to work back. Because if I'm working down, I have leverage. I can see everything. And so this is the big thing that you're seeing now is it's not necessarily teams are running a bunch of cover 2 or they're running Tampa 2. I do think that you're going to see an uptick in that. I do think that Tampa 2 is back. I think you're going to start seeing a ton of teams play Tampa 2. Yeah. But it counters what they're seeing. So offense is like my biggest thing. I'm really curious how like the Bengals and how the Chiefs, who are predominantly spread. Now the Bengals are a little weird because they'll go like 12 personnel on you and just hammer the ball, and the next thing you know they're an empty, right? But like the Chiefs, for instance, if you go and you look at the heat map of Mahomes in 20 and then Mahomes in 21, it's completely different map, right? Everything is underneath 15 yards and right in front of them, and that's because everybody started playing too high. Right, they're playing cover 2, they're playing quarters, they're playing too high, or if they are spinning down, they're spinning away from Tyreek Hill, who's running across the field. So I'm collecting them. It's like getting a head start, right? So going back to your question of is it more zone or is it man? I think zone gives you a little bit more answers to problems, right? Man is a matchup game. Saban has said this before, the best coverage in ball is cover 1, right? It's cat coverage. My cat better than your cat. If I've got better cats than you, we're running cover 1 because he can't do anything. But what we're seeing now is where's the best athletes? The best athletes are playing offense. So if I want to do that, I got to be able to, for instance, I need 2 people on Tyreek Hill all the time. I got to have somebody who's on him, and I got to have somebody away from him to cut him off. And that's where you see, okay, single high is where we want, but we're going to do it from a 2 high shell.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that makes more sense why in the last few years, you've seen like zone numbers like start to pop up more. Because like I said, I all I'd heard from people who I trusted and knew more than myself, kept saying that, Pease is a is a man guy and he wants man coverage. Even some like comments from Pease himself talking about like, well, if I don't have a man guy, I'm not going to ask him to go play man, or if I don't have it, like what you were talking about before, depending on the personnel you have. But when I really got to looking back at the numbers of what was being run, like zone coverage was like dominant as far as like the analytics went. So it didn't that made it a little bit more, you explaining it like that makes a little bit more sense. You're trying to keep people in front of you in those crossers and in that like mesh type game. So yeah, man, that's definitely.
Think about it this way too. You go and you watch, the sexy offenses right now are the McVay Shanahan, right? You go and you look at the way that they're structured, right? Condensed sets, quick motion, run crossing routes, right? What they're trying to bring everybody down,
trying to make them run through mud,
right? So if you're doing that, and I'm gonna play man coverage, I'm in trouble.
Right.
Because my guys better be able to run with their guys. And so again, it goes back to what's the offense doing? What's the down and distance? If it's like a second and medium, it's third and medium, probably need to play man because we want to attack the sticks. If it's second and long, third and long, probably want to play more zone. First down's a 50-50 down. So what's the personnel on there? Can we handle them in man? What are they running out of that personnel? What are they running out of that formation? And then are we blitzing? Are we playing coverage? All of those things factor in. That's why first down is such a hard down to prepare for. And so once you get out of first down, you kind of have an idea, okay, how's this drive going to go? Or how's the series going to go? How's these downs going to go? And that's why first down, if you talk to any good modern defensive coordinator, they will always talk about we have to win first down in order to win third. Right. That third down is overrated. Third down's sexy because we get to do all the crazy stuff, but we only get to do the crazy stuff if we want first down.
If we did what we were supposed to do on first down.
Exactly. Like I tell my kids that all the time when I was coaching. It was like, look, if you want to get to all this cool stuff that we've got, like I've got cool stuff. Like I'll be like a mad scientist over here on this whiteboard and get kids in different places, and the kids love it.
Right.
The kids love it because they're playing in different positions. They're getting to do something fun. But I tell them all the time, if you don't do your job on first and second down, then we can't do any of this fun stuff. It's fun to get a team in third and long and just be able to go, hey, let's go do something crazy. Right, because we know what the protection is going to be. We know where the donkey is, which means who's the worst offensive lineman.
Right.
And let's get pressure on that quarterback and make him just throw it to a check down, and then let's rally, or let's get a sack, let's get a pick. So I think for me that's kind of the mentality when it comes down to the modern defense, especially a modern defense coordinator.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, go
ahead.
I
was just going to say, yeah, that makes sense. If you're letting an offense live in second and short and third and short, then like you're making it too easy. They talk about getting off field on first down, but if you're not disrupting first down, you're not going to get there.
Nope.
That makes total sense.
So, and the other thing I was thinking about too, Cody, and correct me if I'm wrong, the other reason for the high surges when you see these, a lot more zone and too high shell is because of the high, mobile QBs that are now starting to, infiltrate the NFL more so than it has been in years past. That's the changing of the guard now. So if you're running a lot of man and you're being taken away by the receiver, that allows that mobile QB to just get by 20, 30 yards down the field. And since you have so many now, you're seeing that change. And I noticed it a lot more with the Colts because they would run a lot of those too high shells, in the past few years. And now you're starting to see more teams adopt that again over the cover three because of so many weaknesses now that offenses are figuring out and how to beat that cover three, which Gus Bradley seems to want to run until the day he doesn't,
the
NFL.
Yeah, and going back to that, it's funny how like in the NFL, you're so ingrained in your ecosystem, right? And you don't necessarily know what's going on. But I think like guys like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, these guys that can run the ball and will run the ball. What you're doing is you're adding an extra blocker that wasn't there. So if you're running single high, that guy that's responsible for the quarterback is now 20, 30 yards deep pedaling back, right? So the two high system is a typical, like when we're playing an RPO, we're playing an option team, you want to run too high because I got to have that extra player for the quarterback. And I also, again, it's that leverage piece. It's that being that top down from the table, being able to see what's in front of me coming down. Like you said, with the man coverage, you know, if I'm running a bunch of cover one, I've got eyes looking at receivers. I don't have eyes looking at the quarterback or the running guy. So, you know, we're running with the receivers, and then all of a sudden that quarterback goes. If the one guy is in charge of him misses them, well, you know, or somebody misses a gap, you know, now we're in trouble. And I think you're right. Is just that, you know, these quarterbacks now are being asked to be mobile because I think offenses understand now more than ever that +1 mentality, that if I have a statue back there, he better be elite. He better be a Tom Brady.
Right.
And even and I think people sleep on Aaron Rodgers a little bit with what his athletic ability, kind of like with like Steve Young. But it's just kind of the offense that he's in and what he's comfortable with now. I mean, he's not going to start running the ball. I mean, you know what I mean? He's getting close to 40, so he's not going to be running the ball all the time. But I do think that you have in these younger quarterbacks, you have to be able to run. You have to be able to move. Can you move? If you can't move, you better be so good at throwing the ball and so accurate and so fast. And I just don't, you know, and I hate comparing guys because I think it's unfair, but like you almost have to be a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning to be a guy, kind of a statue guy.
Yep. Yeah, that's something that you know, us here in Atlanta have, well, not much anymore with this, but you know, for the 14, 15 years of Ryan being here, like there's these past 4 or 5 years, Toby can tell you, man, it's like the argument that has like been around this fan base about like having a, you know, getting a mobile QB, you know, versus a guy who just, you know, stands there in the pocket. And I kept telling folks, is like, y'all just wait, because the next quarterback we get, that's what he's going to be. Like, I can't tell you who he is yet, but I can tell you he's going to be able to move, because that's where the game's going right now.
Yeah, and I know we got to close it, but, you know, going back on what you said, it truly makes having that mobile QB an 11 on 11 and not just a 10 on 11, because you have that threat that can be able to run the football and add to your running game as well, and make the defense have to defend everybody on the offense instead of just knowing that you're going to have that 11 guy that's a quarterback. If he's a statue, not going to be a threat running the football.
Exactly.
Well, Cody, I think that's going to probably do it for us. We have once again kept you for about an hour. So
no problem.
I think we broke on the last video.
Well, again, we very, very much appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. And if whatever you would like to plug, like all your stuff, tell the folks where they can find you and how they can get the wealth of information that you have.
Yeah, I run a Substack, matchquarters.substack.com. So all of my articles, I send out one a week, and then try and do a podcast kind of over the article from the week before, kind of dissecting it even more, kind of in an audio form. You can also find anything that I've written on matchquarters.com. Just click on the archives. I've got a bunch of stuff over there too. All the links to everything I've got: YouTube Match Quarters. I've got TikTok Match Quarters. I've got, and if you want to follow, and which I've kind of started doing more of these shorts. And so if you follow me on Twitter, that's @the_coach_A. If you're interested in anything that we talked about, I have 5 books. You can find those on Amazon.
And I encourage all y'all to do so. I mean, it is, if you're wanting to understand more about what you're looking at, how this team is constructed, where the game itself is going, like defensive wise, like I would highly recommend, you know, checking out all of Cody's stuff, because it's definitely like the RDX stuff on YouTube that you have, like it's all like really great, really interesting. But as always, y'all can find me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128, GRIMM1128. Toby?
Toby D 1991.
And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.